Howdy, y'all, and welcome to Jimi Zhongguo Yanyi, or creatively translated, The Tale of Teacher Jimmy's Life in China. And I'll say straight out that this video is going to be a bit different from any of the others I've made. See, with most of my videos, I spend hours researching, preparing a presentation, and writing a script. This time, though, I'm going to do my best to just talk about some of my own experiences living in China without worrying too much about any of that. See, I've visited some of the other countries that we've learned about this year, but with the obvious exception of the United States, I've never lived in any of those other places. With China, I really and truly lived there, complete with a job, an apartment, shopping for groceries, paying for utilities, and all that. What's more, aside from the title screen right here, all of the pictures are going to be pictures I took myself, aside from those where you can actually see me in the picture. Just for your reference, I was living in China in the year 2007. So, keep that in mind. All right. I bet most of you know what this is. Since I was living and working in China, not being on vacation, I didn't actually go to a lot of the famous tourist places, but this is an exception: the Great Wall of China. A few things before I say anything else. You may have heard that the myth that the Great Wall is the only man made structure that you can see from space. And I'm here to tell you that that's garbage. Number one, there are actually several man made things that you can see from space, and the Great Wall is actually only barely visible from low orbit. It is really long, more than 12,000 miles, I think, but since it's not really any wider than a road in most places, I think about the widest it ever gets is 30 feet, it's not any more visible from space than some really long highway would be. Anyway, that being said, it's definitely big, or at least long. It wasn't built all at once or even as one piece. It's actually lots and lots of smaller walls that various Chinese emperors and others added to and eventually connected over the course of well over 1,000 years. Large parts of China had a long history of being raided by various people to the north, like the Xiongnu, the Mongols, the Jurchen, and others. And while you might think that the wall was designed to keep those people out, it's actually way too long for the whole thing to be guarded almost at all. Instead, there were lots of little forts along the wall that served as lookout points, and if there were raiders coming, the people in those forts would light signal fires to let everyone know to hide themselves and, well, hide all your valuables, because mostly the raiders would be coming to steal stuff, and hide your stuff before the raiders showed up. Once the raiders from the north made it across the wall, because there was really not much of a way of stopping them, at at that point, once the raiders were already across, the whole wall in that area would be guarded by soldiers who would have basically trapped the aggressive raiders on the Chinese side of the wall, which would keep them from getting away with any of their loot. Now, here's me. If you look above my head, you can just see some terraces cut into the side of the mountains for farming. I will tell you that I did, in fact, walk over every part of the wall that you can see in any of these pictures. Yes, it was a lot of walking. Here's a more close up picture of me walking down part of the wall, but now that I'm looking at this, it makes me want to talk about my friend, the guy in a tan shirt and shorts on the left there. He was an American named Gordon, born in Hawaii, though his parents had come to Hawaii from China. We trained together at a teacher school in the city of Beijing, and as we were teaching together, I would often have college age Chinese people come to me asking if Gordon was really an American. I would tell them, of course he is. He was born in America, just like I was. At which point they would always ask, but you don't really think of him as an American, do you? It was hard for a lot of my students to wrap their heads around the idea that, yes, Gordon really was an American. And it was definitely possible for people who weren't white to be just as American as I was. See, China is made up of a lot of different ethnic groups that most people in the rest of the world would just call Chinese. But there's one dominant group called the Han people who often consider themselves to be the real Chinese people. I had a few students or friends in China who were not Han Chinese, such as Manchus, Mongolians, Hmong, or Uyghurs, and I got to see how Han Chinese folks would sometimes treat them as if they were not really Chinese. At this moment, right now, as many as 1 million Uyghur people are currently being held in prison camps in part of China. Racism is bad, y'all. All right, changing gears. This is the apartment building I lived in for most of my stay in China. I started out living in the capital city of Beijing, but I mostly lived in Daqing, a tiny city in the northeast. Now, I say tiny city because that's how people in China refer to it, but it's close to twice as big as the city of Austin is. China has so many people that, to them, Daqing is just kind of a little town, despite the fact that they have the population in the millions. I lived on the 17th floor of this building, and I'll go ahead and take you on a little trip through my apartment. Here's a corner of my living room. I know the TV seems super old fashioned now, but remember, I was living in China before you were born, so it really wasn't old fashioned then. More interesting is the water dispenser. See, in China, you can't drink the water that comes out of faucets. No one can. It's fine and it's safe to wash with, but you buy your drinking water separately in those big jugs. Also, notice that the water dispenser has a hot water faucet too. People in China would not only use that hot water to make coffee or, more likely, some kind of tea, but people in China frequently drink plain old hot water. I remember once I ran an after school program where the after school snack that we had for the kids were pear slices and hot water. It's not like there aren't plenty of other beverages available in China. I mean, I drank all sorts of fruit juices, soda, and lots of other stuff. But as a cultural thing, Chinese people often drink water hot, and they often drink other things like soda at room temperature. I got really good at specifically asking the waiters and waitresses at restaurants to please put a little ice in my drink, please. This cramped little area is my kitchen. Now, notice that there is no oven. Almost all cooking in a Chinese home is going to be done either on a stove or in a rice cooker or something like that. No baking, no roasting, and nothing of that sort. This is my kitchen from another angle. And that little gizmo in the middle, well, boys and girls, that was my clothes washer. I had to drag it in the middle of the tiny kitchen in order to use it and plug it in to the electricity on the left, hook it up to the kitchen sink faucet on the right, and then connect the drainage hose to this insanely nasty little hole that existed underneath the sink. Seriously, be glad that you can't see that hole. Looking into it was like looking straight into an upside down nightmare. Ugh. You may have noticed that there was no dryer. Instead, I and everyone else in the city hung up our clothes to dry on clotheslines that were in these enclosed porches connected to our apartments. You couldn't hang the clothes up outside anywhere because they would definitely freeze. See, I lived way up in the north part of China, and nothing about my life in Texas had really prepared me for the level of cold that was there. To illustrate, one time I took a shower in my apartment, dried off, got dressed, and was going to go out to do something. After going down the elevator and leaving the building, I walked about 10 feet away from the front door, only to find that my slightly damp hair had just frozen into icicles while it was still right next to my head. That was awesome. To keep warm, all buildings in Daqing are full of these. It's a heater that has super hot water pumping through it all day long. If you're wondering, isn't it a little dangerous to have something like that out in the open where anyone, including children, could touch it and get burned? The answer: yes. Yes, it is dangerous. But in Chinese culture, there's a very strong attitude of, you know, if you're not careful and something bad happens to you, that's your own dumb fault. There's not a lot of suing people over accidents in China. If you fall down a hole in the sidewalk that didn't have any warning signs next to it, well, that'll teach you to watch where you're going next time. Here is the outside of my apartment door. And if you're wondering, Teacher Jimmy, is your door completely covered in Santa Claus wrapping paper? Well, the answer is yes, it most definitely is. And it was like that when I moved into the apartment in July. See, Western culture is, in many cases, very popular and kind of cool in China, even if it's used in ways that don't make sense to an American, like a door covered in Santa wrapping paper in July. This is a view of the city from my apartment window. That little place down there with the red sign was where I used to escape to if I was having a rough day. See, I actually didn't have to work that much in China, usually about 25 or 26 hours a week, because being a foreign teacher paid pretty well by Chinese standards. But those hours weren't evenly distributed, and sometimes I teach for 12 hours in a single day. On those days, on my little bitty break, I'd slip over to that store and have my America treat: a Coca Cola, a Snickers bar, and a bag of American flavored potato chips. I'm pretty sure I have a picture of potato chips coming up, so I'll talk about that when I get to it. Here's another picture from my apartment, and here's another one of an elementary school that you could see from my window. Funny thing, I taught at a whole lot of schools while living in Daqing, but never at that one. Okay, this one is near and dear to my heart. Most of my apartment building was filled with old retired people, and any day where the weather wasn't too far below freezing, all of the old guys who lived in my building would gather around these stone tables outside the apartment building, and they'd play games together. Sometimes they would play mahjong, which is a gambling game, and sometimes they would play xiangqi, which is what you see right here. Xiangqi developed from the same ancient Indian game that chess comes from, and it plays a lot like chess, except there are cannons. It's awesome. Now, I didn't know how to play Mahjong, but I had heard of it. But I had never even heard of Xiangqi when I moved to China, and I got curious about it. In my spare time, I went on the internet and I taught myself how to play. And once I was pretty sure that I understood the rules, I walked up to these guys one day and asked them in my not very good Chinese if I could play with them. All talking stopped, and they all just stared at me in shock for about 6 or 7 seconds. And then they were all shouting at each other and arguing over who got to play the young guy from America first. That's actually the name they gave me, Meiguo, which means America. It doesn't mean American or person from America, but just America, like the country. I met some really interesting people while playing with them, at least one of whom I'll tell you about as part of an activity later this week. This is my office at the main school that I taught at. See, in China, just like Japan, teachers don't have their own classrooms, and instead, they share a big office and go to teach in whatever room needs teaching in at the time. This is the classroom that I taught in more than any other. It's not very big because this room wasn't at a regular school. It was an extra school that taught additional English lessons on the weekends. I spent plenty of time in standard Chinese schools, but I spent more than half my time giving extra lessons in places like this. Here's what the room looks like from the other direction. I wonder whatever happened to that old lemon clock there. Hmm. Here are some of my old students. I told them to do something cool for the picture, and this is what happened. Here's another class. Look over on the left, and you should see two girls dressed in purple. They were twins, and they were the only kids I ever taught who had a brother or a sister. See, for a long time, China had a rule called the one child policy, where almost all families in the country were limited to having just one child. See, China has more people than almost any other country in the world, and for more than 30 years, the country tried to slow population growth by limiting families to having just one child. Families that broke that law were subjugated to incredibly huge fines and potentially worse. Here's some more students of mine, a few more, a couple more, and here are some completely adorable 4 and 5 year olds that I taught. As an American from Texas, I always thought the little bitty cute three-wheeled trucks that you see here in China were just adorable. I called them tricycle trucks. What do you think? Ah, Mai Dong Lao. I have a feeling you might be able to recognize this restaurant. I included the picture of a Chinese McDonald's because I wanted to show you the yellow piece of paper on the window. Can you see that it has a smiley face on it? All restaurants in China have that piece of paper near the door, and it represents the health inspector's report on how clean the restaurant is. You could get a score of a smiley face, a straight line face, or a frowny face. Good to know that McDonald's is rocking a smiley face, right? Occasionally in China, you'll see slightly awkward, misspelled English signs, which I chose to represent with this picture. Don't go to the lavatory everywhere, which was basically telling people at the park not to go to the bathroom out in the open. Lovely. Once again, I picked a familiar place to tell you about something specifically Chinese. The story I'm about to tell you, it didn't happen at Walmart, but it did happen at a place kind of like it. Now, hold on. You know what? Since it's written on the screen, I think I'll make Walmart our secret word. Walmart. Notice there is only one L and the W needs to be capitalized. Anyway, what really shocked me about living in China, it wasn't the big differences. I was expecting those. I knew the food would be different. I knew that people spoke a different language and, stuff like that. What really struck me are those little differences that you don't even think about. In my case, the thing I always remember is the fact that people in China do not stand in line. The first time I went to a grocery store, I spent 20 minutes politely waiting my turn to pay for my stuff while all the other people in the store were rushing past and blatantly cutting in front of me. I was getting really mad, thinking they were like being racist because I wasn't Chinese, until I finally figured out that they weren't being rude. Standing in line to wait for things like an open register, well, it just wasn't a part of Chinese culture. I'm taller than literally every single Chinese person I met, and no one ever had any problem with me dodging my way to the front once I figured out that, that's how things were supposed to work. I said we'd talk about potato chips, and here they are. The yellow bags on the left are regular Lay's potato chips, just like most of you have had many times before. All the rest are, well, let's just say different. In China, the regular potato chip flavor is called American flavor, and some other popular flavors I tried were cucumber, lemon tea, blueberry, and fish soup. There were barbecue flavored chips, but they don't taste like barbecue sauce. They taste like meat. Seriously, you eat one of those and you have like a meat aftertaste in your mouth. There were also plenty of Cheetos in China, not a single one of which was cheese flavored. I'll admit though, I still have a soft spot for the shrimp flavored chips. Those were amazing. Sometimes, as I'd walk around China, there would be hilarious art just randomly painted onto different things. Near my apartment, all the stores had these little cartoons painted on their metal shutters for, whenever the store was closed, like this one of the man preemptively painting the bump on the other guy's head. Finally, we'll end here. This is an Asian toilet. And no, your eyes don't deceive you. It's not a toilet that you can sit on. It is flush, it is flat, right on the floor. If you're ever going to travel to a lot of the different countries in Asia, this is the type of toilet you'll usually see. And many people in Asia see Western toilets, you know, where your bare bottom touches the same place as other people's bare bottoms, as being gross and unsanitary. Now, wasn't that a pleasant note to end on? I hope you've enjoyed this little trip through a few of my experiences. If you have any questions, feel free to email me and I will answer them as best as I'm able. Until next time, please stay safe and stay healthy.